Hello, this is a short video which supports the lecture I'll be giving on Friday. So the idea is you'll watch this video, there's a task within it, and the lecture course is around harnessing the power of social media for learning. And the aim of this presentation is to start defining some of the key terms or concepts so that we've got a similar understanding, such as what is digital literacy and what am I interested within it, and what is social media. Make you aware of a scenario of how you can use social media to enhance your learning, and make you also think about how to better manage your digital presence, as our use of social media is wonderful. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but there are some things we need to take into consideration when we use it. So this is really about thinking about how you, the student, can use some of these social media web tools to enhance your learning. Okay, there's a task within it and we'll come to that, and then I'll discuss those further as we go along. So what is the rationale? I suppose what I'm trying to do is take a step back. I don't want to see, I'm not seeing the wood for the trees, so I want to take a step back and think very hard about what's the rationale for using social media and what are some of the digital literacies that I require. I'm going to go into the rationale of why social media is good for learning in a little bit later, but I'm going to start from another aspect, which is the one around digital literacies and digital technologies. Now this comes from the JISC. Yep, so this here is around digital literacy ideas, and I think it's quite interesting that there's an observation across for all of us as graduates and trying to seeking jobs and our employability. One of the rationales is, well, we're aware that 90%, this suggesting that 90% of new jobs will require excellent digital skills. Improving digital literacies is an excellent component of developing employable graduates. In other words, rationale for you engaging in this session is not only will you learn in the short term, in the terms of hopefully harnessing technology to improve your discipline knowledge, but you'll also improve your general skills, graduate skills type knowledge and around digital literacies. So this will be quite good for you as a process for enhancing your employability in your future, given, according to the GIST, the Joint Information Services, the expectation or prediction that 90% of new jobs in the UK or whatever will require excellent digital skills. So we need to start harnessing and managing and developing those skills. So what do we mean by digital literacy? Well, again, I've taken the GIST, but it's a different document this time, so the URL is slightly different. And they've used a very broad term or definition of digital literacies, allowing us really to unpack it later. And they say digital literacy defines those capabilities which fit an individual for living, learning and working in a digital society. It's a very broad, sweeping tool, but I think it's the unpacking, and I've picked on a few of them from the particular article that are very relevant to us and appropriate to us as learners on this course, and as you as students going through your general undergraduate courses. And those are the learning skills, the communication and collaboration skills, and the ICT computer literacy skills. So these are all part of what we call digital literacy. So digital literacy isn't a simple concept, it's a number of capabilities within it. And I think you'll hopefully understand a bit more as I quote from the document. So the learning skills aspect, or capability. And this is where they've identified the ability to study and learn effectively in a technology-rich environment, formal and informal, including use of digital tools to support critical thinking, academic writing, note-taking, reference management, time and task management, and being assessed and attending to feedback in digitized formats, and independent study. So this, I think, is absolutely wonderful, because this is starting to think about, I want to further develop my critical thinking skills, my academic writing skills and my reference management as part of my broad learning skills. So you can see the employability and transferability from that straight off. So that's crucial. The communication and collaboration, what sort of capabilities are we talking about here? Again, the GISC have applied it quite nicely to say this is really about the ability for you to participate in digital networks of knowledge. And these will maybe involve scholarship, research and learning, and to work in groups supported by digital forms of communication. So we need to start to look at, within the rationale of future employability and learning now, we need to look at our abilities there to work in groups supported by digital forms of communication so that we can participate in our networks of knowledge, be them research, scholarship or learning. The ICT skills, which is the one most people quite tend to latch onto quite quickly, are the ones that are easier to deal with. They're lower barriers in a sense, because this is the ability to adopt and use digital devices, applications and services in pursuit of goals, especially scholarly and educational ones. So this is the sort of nitty-gritty of how do I use what are the social media tools I might start using, what do I need to consider, and what buttons might I need to push. So that's an idea there around digital literacy. Something we're also very interested in terms of for this aspect is the digital literacies around the social media, because this is sort of a developing area, and the idea of, well, what is social media? And I've deliberately picked a quote. I've quoted or taken my definition from Wikipedia, which is a very well-known social media site or service, and can offer some really good peer-reviewed opportunities within it. And we look at interactive platforms via which individuals and communities create and share user-generated content. So in terms of what is social media, it's a platform so that you and our community friends and colleagues can create, share user-generated content, stuff that you've thought about, developed and worked through. So that is a very broad term of what social media is. What I'd like you to do before the lecture, because we'll develop it further in the lecture, is to read this article here, which is available online and is also through the library catalogue. Users the world unite, the challenges and opportunities of social media. And the URL is this one there. Okay, so it's from openmediaart.com. So have a read of that relatively short article to get a better understanding of really what are the challenges and opportunities of social media, and we'll discuss those further. The next, I suppose, area is, if we're going to talk about this, I need to shift from the abstract to the very practical. And I want to really talk about what is social media, or in the sense of why should you, the student, start using social media. I'm going to look at this from two aspects. I'm going to look at it from the individual. This happens to be student A, the case studies available on the URL here from the Elevate blog, and she's a Macy student. So she's a student studying on the Macy course, the MA course there, and she used Twitter. The other thing, though, is to look at it very broadly at what we call the large or macro scale, through the production possibility frontier. And this is a concept that I've pinched from economics, which says all of your inputs, if you use them most efficiently, this is the highest optimal potential you can reach. Okay, that's your highest output. And we're interested in thinking about some of the social media tools, the Twitters, the Digos, the Google Docs, the Wikipedias, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, to say how, as a student, you can use them to help achieve your most optimum output for learning, be it with the supporting learning skills, communication, collaboration and ICT. So how you can learn to get to your most efficient point, but also see about moving the curve. In other words, can we use these to do things we've never been able to do before? So that you move your curve out and you can now move to a higher optimum and go further there. So for me, one of the interesting things about social media as a learner, using the tools available, is can it make my learning more efficient and effective, and can it enhance it so I can do things I've never been able to do before? So that would move it there. Now, if we apply those sort of ideas and we look at what student A on this Macy course, what she was using, or how she thought about it, we can start to see this coming through. I think this is really interesting. This, as I say, we did a session on Twitter for them a couple of years ago, and she took it and ran with this. This is one of the case studies we wrote afterwards. So she started to use Twitter, and she'd put herself down as a technophobe beforehand. She discovered Twitter, and she said it was simply a revelation. She thought it brought things to a PC information resources that she would not have come across through searching the library, databases, journals, catalogues and Google. In other words, she was starting to find, discover and use resources which moved on because of the Twitter, the social media tool, putting her up much closer to her full potential, and then taking her further and enhancing it. So it's a tool that required very few skills but yielded fascinating outcomes. Clearly a student here that's used Twitter as a social media tool to really enhance, in her view, her social media, her learning. And the case study takes on further with some actual examples of that. So this could be one of the reasons why you should be thinking about, well, why should you use social media? It can enhance your learning. It's a dare if you embrace it or harness the power of it, as this student did here. Moving from the abstract to the practical case study to the, well, can I put some meat on the bones? What do I actually mean? What is a typical learning scenario? And I've got one here. And I've used loads of tools. I've probably overcomplicated it. It doesn't have to be this complicated. And when we look at the one in the lecture, I'll take a very simple model of just 2 tools and I'll strip loads of things out. And this is a scenario as a student, as a learner, we always have to do. We're all about discovering web-based resources or information or ideas and concepts. We're also about making or controlling those resources, and then we're also about starting to, after thinking about them, explaining what we're up to or what our understanding of these things, and sharing it so that other people can see what and read what we think we've interpreted or taken or applied and analysed, and then they can take that on board and challenge in a critical friend sort of way, a very positive way. So a very common task in the sense of discovering it, getting ownership over it, interpretation of the resource in terms of your understanding of it and you're taking meaning from it, and sharing that with people so that they can comment back, and again you learn from that feedback loop, and they got the feedback loop going. So what we picked is Twitter, Diigo and Google Docs as the 3 tools. Now if you've not seen Twitter before, this is the actual post of somebody, and I've picked The Economist here as an organisation, and what we're doing is really taking on board the fact that increasingly organisations and individuals are disseminating, they're telling the world what they're doing via Twitter, and this is a very typical method of doing it. It's a short post because Twitter is very short, and The Economist said here that it's a short post. If you click on this link here, you'll go off and you'll get the full article, which is what it's about. So powering a country with energy that's cheap, low carbon and secure appears to be feasible as finding a unicorn. And this is the article that they've actually expanded on why they've come to that conclusion. And I would read that. And this is great because I might not find it on a Google search, I might not find it in my library catalogue, and I might not find it on my reading list because it's much more up to date. So all I have to do is follow The Economist, but I don't want to go to the website all the time because that doesn't scale. I might have 20 or 30 or 40 organisations and people I'm trying to find information out from, and I don't want to keep going to their website because I won't find time for that. But if I'm a member of Twitter and I search on Twitter for The Economist, this comes up. And this tells me how often they've tweeted, who's following them, all this sort of stuff. But more interestingly, I've got a follow button, and if I click that, every time The Economist writes something, posts a tweet, it appears in my view of the world, in my view of Twitter, and now I can scan through that and I can say, oh okay, and click on the link, and then up pops the article. So I'm using it to discover and harness what people are writing and saying. I'm not actually communicating through it, I'm actually just using it as a way of pulling together lots of relevant information and giving me a view on the world within my own personal learning network. Then I need to think about, well, okay, the Twitter's very good at saying what's happening, but I might need to keep that resource for a lot longer because I might need to keep it and I want to bookmark it. And then we use a tool such as Diigo. So I could cut and paste that, I could open up my Diigo, click on add, fill in the form, and then I'll have something like this, and this will stay for years and years and years and years and years. And this is 2000, this is an article I put in. I can share it, I can put tags on it, I can put it into folders, so it's a really good way of of managing it. But I think the sharing bit brings the social aspect in, because you're then in a position to take that on board and go further with it. But importantly, I need to think about it, interpret it and understand it, and I want people to review or think, to challenge me in my understanding, and if they do that, I've got lots of learning going on. I'm starting to interpret it in a certain way, and for this I am going to use Google Docs. Google Docs is wonderful because it offers the 2 aspects really simply. It's something I control. It's like an online Word document or word processor, so I can take that URL, I can write a paragraph or 2 about it, my understanding, interpretations of it. It automatically saves, and when I want to share it with people, instead of sending them attached documents on an email or something like that, I put their details in the share option, and they get an email. They click on that, they read the document, and they can comment on it, etc. So a very simple process where I'm using the power of social media, the platform, to be able to create, share and generate content and ideas. So it's challenging my ideas, which is what learning of course is all about. So it's challenging it in that process is there, and I've used a number of tools to do it. I've found stuff I'm unlikely to find in my current library catalogues and reading lists. I've stored it just in case I ever want to come back to it, but at the same time I've also started to unpack it, deconstruct it, try to understand what that means and what's my understanding of that article and how it's relevant to my discipline. Again, moving from it's all very good indeed, but what I want to do now is come up with this idea of social media. I've some really good reasons for using social media, and I've got some ideas of needing to enhance my digital literacy to make sure I can use social media, but I also need to manage my digital presence. So this is the idea that if I'm using these things, if I use them in a certain way, then I will be safe. I will reduce the risks of using them. And I've taken here, many institutions have them, this is the social media guidance forms, a selection of the ideas from the University of Cumbria, and it's available on that website there. And I've only picked 5, sort of some of the top 5s, but it's to start to make us think about, well, if I'm using Twitter, if I'm using Facebook, if I'm using YouTube for my learning, as well as for other things, perhaps in my larger life, work balance, life cycles, how can I use it in a way that would help manage my digital presence so it's safer for me to use it, and I'm not going to have any issues of that you might come into around e-safety, copyright, aspects of even using it and the website disappearing, or the service disappearing. So I picked 5 which I think are really important, though there are many more listed, and we'll challenge a few of those, get you to think about 3 of those in the session. Know what you'll personally know that you are, this is one for me the key one, you are personally responsible for the content you publish online. And it will be there for a very, very long time. Okay? So therefore, when you're trying to apply for jobs, no doubt many years down the line, you're in your 40s with a happy family or whatever, you may find that some of this information is still there from your student days. Want to think about. Have an exit strategy. Everything we do should have an exit strategy. It should inform how we use it. I deliberately use tools that are unlikely to disappear quickly. You know, your YouTubes, your Googles, your Twitters, they're around for a long time, but they do change, and the conditions in terms of use change. We know I've had this with Facebook recently, so you might need to think about having an exit strategy of, if it closes or changes or you become unhappy about its use, how are you going to start exiting it to another tool or whatever. So have an exit strategy. Don't put anything online that you wouldn't feel comfortable seeing in a newspaper. Yeah, just because it's online, it's actually got a larger global audience. So be very aware of what you put online and how you write things and how they may be interpreted. So if you wouldn't be happy seeing it in a tabloid or a broadsheet, don't stick it online. Don't disclose any personal information beyond your name and role, a specialism. This is for a university-based one. But really, they don't need to know. These services don't need to know, and the world, the users you're talking to within the services, don't need to know much about you. Yeah, so keep it to a minimum, unless you all really think about what you're putting on there. You really need to protect your identity. And for me, the final one of my top 5, and there's many listed, is don't disclose any personal information about others. We're guardians of privacy for them as well. Their privacy will be protected. So we need to think about that. So don't start disclosing information about others or making comments about others in a way that you would be uncomfortable if it was done for you, or you'd be uncomfortable if you'd see it in a newspaper. So it's very common sense. But it's again the realization that this is, even though you're maybe talking to you think a small network, these things can go viral, they can spread very, very quickly. Finally then, what will we cover in the lecture? We've an hour to cover a number of things, and I'm going to focus on trying to answer a number of questions. Firstly, what are the challenges and opportunities of social media? So this will involve me developing another authentic learning scenario, but this time we're going to look really around the ideas of YouTube. But taking on board the article that you hopefully would have read beforehand to think about, well, what are the challenges and opportunities about social media, giving it much more of an academic underpinning, what it offers, and that's from the Kaplan article. Developing authentic learning scenarios, as I say, and I'm really interested here, and I'll be developing one about a scenario around YouTube, of how I can use YouTube in a very positive way for my learning. Why and how to manage your web presence. So we're going to go back to some, and we'll use the Cumbria one. I'm also use a couple of other institutions as a way to give us a framework of why it is important. I don't think, from this session here, have I really covered the why is it important, and then some of the practical steps, a couple of practical steps to see how you can do that, and then finally discuss your formative assignment. And the formative assignment is in fact a peer review assignment, and the main primary way of learning about the topic is through the completion of the assignment and the review or the peer assessment of your colleagues. So it's the learning through that aspect. So I really want to talk about the marking criteria. I want to give you some examples which let you start to mark a couple of these pieces as well, and then talk about through the software that we're going to use. Okay, thank you very much.